So, today's topic has been pending for about a year and a half now. It's not a particularly difficult topic, it's just I find it hard to express from a position of not defending what is not defensible, which is, say, heinous acts when you, say, physically mess with someone, when you burn down someone's home, vandalism to sum it all up, little acts like that have a big impact. I don't want to make it sound like I'm siding with the person who's committing those activities, but I want to explore the lead up to that because very often I feel like we forget that we're animals, and as animals, we have limited rationality, if that makes sense. Like, sure, we can reason with each other because we have established conduct patterns, principles, disciplines. But at the very core, you're still this creature that's still responding to stressors. And I feel like people don't understand or forget very easily what it's like to operate when you're under stress, when you're in your primal senses. You ever get spitting angry and you feel like your head is spinning, everything is spinning, everything goes very fast but very slow at the same time? Your adrenal gland is just difficult to calm down. You just gotta like establish a physical distance sometimes. Those things, I feel people forget about it, and it isn't until the aftermath, during the investigation element of it, that we all slow the fuck down and we start evaluating the situation. And all of a sudden, it's like what's obvious becomes more obvious, but we're acting like this is shocking news. But anyway, with that said, I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as I express myself with the meat of the topic, which is when pillars of society commit crimes. To me, examples of pillars in society would be the individuals who you absolutely cannot just have society as we know it without. Those would be your cops, your teachers, your firefighters, individuals with those respectable positions. I wouldn't really say business owners, depending on what kind of business they have, I guess. But corporations, they're questionable. But I'm talking about the people who actually inhabit those positions. Not the life of the business itself or what the business supplies, but the individuals who compose the group of people who manage the flow of business to where society can function the way it does. Say, someone in a government position, whoever is responsible for deploying things like the electric company or deploying the assistance for fixing disasters or doctors, things like that, people like that, I would consider those are more pillars in society. Even a school principal could be a pillar in society. Some church pastors, depending on the influence of their church, could be a pillar in society. So, with that said, those are the people I have in mind as I describe this. I felt it was necessary for me to define what a pillar in society is. But I don't want to limit it necessarily to just a job. It could be a position, a symbolic position that you occupy and what it represents and what it does to a community. That is a pillar to me. You guys ever hear those stories of how a cop did something terrible, a doctor did something terrible? It's an individual who's considered a pillar in their community, a pillar in society, and how we're acting shooketh that someone like that could kill somebody, abuse somebody, steal, vandalize something, all those things. And I'm just sitting there wondering, why does it shock you that a person like that has a snapping point? Because superficially, I guess you're judging the person's achievements, which is, well, they have this job, this position, this prestige, this privilege. Therefore, their life is somehow perfect to you, but you're not considering as an adult what it's like to hold those positions. That's why with teenagers, I always feel bad for them. I hope that they have good guidance Teenagers, I just hope that they can meet one person in their lives who defines things for them so that they don't become easily impressed or impressionable to where you become easily manipulated. When you aspire for those things that the pillars in society have, you can admire the respect because of what they symbolize, but you don't consider to think about what it's costing them. For instance, with the policeman, you could be like, okay, my dad is this awesome cop and he puts bad guys away, this and that. Okay, great. But that means that he's a cop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, meaning that even when he's not on duty, he's still expected to behave like he's on duty if he observes something that needs to be called out. The physical consequences of that, because a lot of these folks are going to have back issues, and back issues are some of the most expensive, some of the most crippling, but not even that. You could have other kinds of health issues associated with your lack of sleep, with your constant, I don't know, 12-hour shifts, sometimes back to back, very little time off, and the way that your mind is continuously processing the things that you may have observed in your day. Like maybe you get called to a scene where the scene is impactful. There may be blood everywhere. There may be broken things, broken people, all that. Some people can stomach that, but some people at some point that gets tiring and old because you really don't see the escape. You don't see the end to that. That will mess up with someone's head. Why would you think that it wouldn't? And on top of that, it's not just that person who's the pillar who's suffering. Their families may be suffering too, because this is less time that you may have, say, your father around or your mother around, and maybe some of your emotional needs are not going to be fulfilled. All those little things. Why wouldn't you consider that pillars in society are sacrificing themselves in ways that you may not be able to see because all that you're seeing is the prize that they have, which is the respect, the prestige, the recognition that they may get in their community, the power that they have in their community, but you're not really considering how maybe they have to sacrifice their sleep, they have to sacrifice their physical abilities, like say they'll be all stiff and moving slow because they don't get to exercise, or maybe their hygiene sometimes suffers because mobility issues, or maybe because they legit don't have time to take showers as often as they need to, or take deep cleansing showers depending on your line of work. And don't even get me started on the things that may haunt you down the line. Firefighters, like the lung issues they're gonna have, the skin issues they're gonna have, all those things, and how this is going to play out later in the future, how this is going to affect your family, and inevitably how it's going to affect you. With those little details, with those little factors, when a pillar in society commits crimes, and another crime could be something like infidelity, are you really shocked? Are you really surprised when you think about the actual cost of you as a person going through life with some of the areas that are crucial in your life going unfulfilled, not being met? If you have physical needs and those are not being fulfilled because you're away from the person who's supposed to be fulfilling those, or maybe when you make it home, you yourself are not able to respond or serve in that regard because of how much in pain you are, how tired you are. The last thing you want to do is move, do physical things. You don't have the energy, or you have to transition on to the next thing, the next adventure, the next resting period, all those things. You don't think that at some point that's going to drive someone crazy? I think aspiring to be a pillar in society is better for you if you don't have things that are requiring your attention. Like say you don't have a home life, you're single, sure, you go right ahead because you're by yourself. Nobody needs you. Nobody depends on you except the place that you're showing up to. Your professional commitment can handle that. But if you're trying to have everything at the same time, like the family, the partner, the spouse, the material things, the desire to vacation and wonder and all that, it's gonna take a while for you to have those things, especially if you don't come from privilege. And I find that is something that also isn't considered, because some people come from little to no resources, that all you can think about is grinding away for a long time so that you can build yourself up to a certain point where you can begin to consider having recreational time. But if you come from a background of inheriting debt, or you yourself got in debt, or maybe you have medical challenges going on, God forbid you have a parent who needs you, because maybe your parents had you older in life, therefore they're up there in age by the time you're in your 20s, 30s, or pushing 40. That all adds up, and it's not to make an excuse for how some people may not be doing as good as others, but I'm just saying that having at least a degree of financial backup is going to give you an edge. And even people who get backed up financially still do bad things because something else was not being fulfilled, while the quest for having that position of having money and power was being fulfilled. To have that, it requires attention. Attention means that something else is not going to have your presence, your attention. Therefore, when there is a huge imbalance in those areas, that's when you get these crazy incidents that involve pillars in society. Can we please just stop acting like pillars in society are somehow supposed to be superior? They're supposed to be immune to, say, horrible things, or they couldn't possibly be individuals who you cannot suspect because they're so dedicated that they don't fit the profile of someone who would do something like that. That troubled person, the poor person, the person who went to like public education or had little resources, or the person who didn't complete high school, something like that, the entry-level worker, all those things. That's supposed to be the most suspicious person because they have more motive possibly backing them up. Really? That is the best you could come up with? Pillars in society could also have motives, which is they're fed up with their lifestyle, but maybe they're not always, because at some point that facade that they're living lasts. But at some point, that image begins to break because maybe they're starting to break, either physically or mentally, or maybe they interact with other people who have a different lifestyle and it gives them ideas as to what kind of lifestyle to aspire to, something like that. And then suddenly you get this break in their reality and they're like, oh shit, I actually would like to do something different now. This actually wasn't my calling. I'm just doing this because I thought it was what would be cool for me or what was expected for me. Yeah, that's gonna make someone go ape shit. They're gonna go bananas because they realize that, especially if you have 20, 30, 40 years of doing this shit, you wasted your darn life, your darn time, and that is something that you cannot get back. Therefore, they're just going to snap. Why is that shocking? Is it because making it shocking news is more appealing for you to sell the story? Like, you'll sell it as an outrage because, again, it's rare for this to be a person who fits the profile of who we anticipate would be likely to commit heinous things, heinous acts. Therefore, we gotta milk the story and blow it up more than it really is, and then get other people to think that it's like the worst thing in the world, that it happened involving this pillar in society as opposed to someone low class who you think is condemned to that level of failure. Really, I find stories like that super cringe. So no, stop acting like pillars in society are somehow supposed to be better than us just because of the occupation they happen to respond to. Maybe some of those folks got there because it's the only life they knew. Maybe their parents belonged to that society, therefore they inherited the interest of being, I don't know, involved in one of those pillar careers. I know I was influenced by my mom into wanting to be a teacher, but then I realized that wasn't going to be the right thing for me. And I had to discover that because my circumstances aligned just right. I was neglected enough to where I had enough freedom to think about these things independently, without anyone really tainting my perception, that I made it to defining that wouldn't be the right thing for me. But not everybody can do that. And that's why I don't find it surprising when suddenly a pillar in society may do something crazy because it didn't align with their values. They were paying a certain cost that was too great, but they internalized it so well that once it blows up and it comes out like this, we're all shocked. Huh? What? So, anyways, you guys, that's it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that the way I said this makes sense because it's one of those things that it's just hard for me to explain in a way that doesn't mean that I'm trying to say, oh, yeah, they're justified at acting like that. It is never justified to do something terrible, especially if your mind has that processing capability to understand what it means to do what you're doing or what you did and how it affects people. Evil deeds, you should know what something evil is to not find yourself involved in committing acts like that. But when it does happen, I also cannot 100% sit here and be like, but why? Because ultimately, you cannot change your composition. You still have stressors, you still have adrenaline. You're just an animal doing animal things. But we're somehow acting like we're not supposed to be like that anymore. Like somehow being part of a civil society and holding positions of respect will somehow turn off permanently, keep that switch of you going literally feral deactivated somehow. Somehow that is just not a thing anymore. Huh? What? Can you change your composition of running on blood to running on oil? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It shouldn't. But anyways, you guys, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know your thoughts.